The Indian Prime Minister has recently visited Ukraine and Poland. And in this video, we are going to analyze the entire visit and what did India get out of this. Should India be undertaking such visits in the future or not? Let's examine each point one by one. The relationship between India and Ukraine and India and Poland is not very new. If we look at Poland first, you'll be surprised to know that our relationship with Poland actually goes back to before the period of India's independence. When India was still colonized by the British, at that time, there were a lot of Polish people who were traveling from India. They were traveling at a time when the World War II was happening. And because the World War II was a very severe war happening in Europe, and Poland was one of the very affected countries during the World War II, when these Polish people were crossing through India, at that time, two important rulers of our princely states, the ruler of Rajkot and the ruler of Kolhapur, these two people at that time advised these Polish people not to go beyond the borders of India because the World War II was going on. And in fact, these number of Polish people were not just small, they were approximately 15 to 20,000 of them. These 15 20,000 Polish people who were actually passing through India, going back to Europe, were stopped at that time by the princely state rulers of Maharaja of Kolhapur and the Maharaja of Rajkot. They gave them shelter. They told them, wait till the World War II gets over, then go back. And effectively, that happened. That when the World War II came to an end, these Polish people, the Polish nationals who were in India, they went back to Poland. Now, when they went back to Poland at that time, one very important thing that happened was that the government of Poland actually thanked the government of India later on after India became independent, saying that these two princely state rulers of yours actually protected our citizens, and we are very, very thankful for that. Imagine that India having its relationship with Poland even before India became independent. When India became independent finally, at that time Poland became a part of the Soviet Union because India had proximity with Soviet Union. So at that time one thing became very clear, that Soviet gave us the space to engage with Poland. When we engaged with Poland at the diplomatic level during Cold War, we were surprised to found that these Polish people at that time were highly intellectual people who were very fond of poetry. Now, because we found that the Polish people are very fond of poetry, we decided at that time that we will engage with them. We translated our ancient poetry of Kalidas. We translated Raja Taranjini. We gave the copies to those Polish people in the Polish universities in Polish language. They read our poetry. They were amazed. They found that there is so much of depth in Indian poetry, and that to the ancient Indian poetry. That became a connecting factor between India and Poland during the Cold War period. Now, when the Cold War came to an end, at that time, one thing became very clear, that Poland drifted away from the Soviet. They started exploring a market based economy and they joined EU. They wanted to engage and deepen their ties with EU. And more importantly, they became a part of North Atlantic Treaty Organization or NATO. Now, one thing also importantly that happened at that time was that India recognized this. India realized that if I don't engage with Poland right now, I might lose in the long run. Why? Because Poland at that time was located very strategically in Eastern Europe. And India realized that if we leverage our historical engagement with Poland now at the end of the Cold War, we can probably have a very deep engagement with these people, specifically in the Eastern European realm. And India tried to explore that. So, India's relationship with Poland has always been very strong, very fruitful. But now the question is Ukraine. Why Ukraine? Was India the first time right now to visit Ukraine? Or did we have our Prime Minister as the first Prime Minister to visit Ukraine? No. Historically, many Indian Prime Ministers have gone to Ukraine. But very importantly, if you observe, then our Prime Minister's visit in the present times is more significant than the past visits. Let's understand why. For the first time in this visit, India has tried to explore a new template of diplomacy which is called the wartime diplomacy. Ukraine and Russia are right now in a war. Wartime diplomacy is a very prominent feature that India has tried to explore in this time period. How? By going to Ukraine, India has reiterated very carefully this time that we don't stand with Ukraine, we don't stand with Russia, we stand for peace. We are here for a diplomacy of peace. By making this kind of a statement, we have given a large and a strong message to the European Union that we are not here to take sides in diplomacy. We are here to deal with diplomacy through the principle of pragmatism, that is, through the principle of peace. Because today, the entire European Union is busy taking sides. Somebody is with Russia, somebody is with the Americans, but nobody stands for peace. So, by going there as the largest democracy on earth, we have tried to convey a very strong message to them through the Ukraine visit that we stand here for peace, number one. Number two, there's a bigger geopolitical aspect in the visit also. In this visit, when our Prime Minister went, we signed a lot of agreements. We signed various agreements with Ukraine, which are primarily on high technology. We signed agreements with them which are on critical and emerging technologies. But there's another important aspect to be kept in mind here. Most of these high technology, critical, and emerging technology agreements are merely shields which are used for much bigger games that are played behind the curtains. What are those games? Media will not tell you this. Let's understand them. For the last 1 year, Americans have been deliberately provoking the Pakistanis to sell weapons to Ukraine. And Pakistan has been selling weapons to Ukraine. Pakistan has sold a lot of weapons to Ukraine. But there's a caveat. The caveat is none of these weapons are Pakistani weapons. All these weapons that Pakistan is today selling to Ukraine are weapons which Pakistanis import from China. China has been selling a lot of weapons to Pakistan, and Pakistan has got the permission of China, number one, to sell these weapons to Ukraine. Number two, when Pakistan sells these weapons to Ukraine, in Ukraine, the Americans and their intelligence community, they very carefully analyze these Pakistani weapons. They allow the Ukrainian forces to use them, but they very carefully analyze them. Why? Because when they analyze these weapons, they get a deep insight about how the Chinese are manufacturing their weapons. They get a deep insight about what goes into the mind of the Chinese when they make the weapons. And this is very crucial for America because America, in the long run, wants to counter China. If America wants to counter China, America has to first grab a deep insight about the military industrial complex of China. Because the military industrial complex of China is very closed, there is no other way to penetrate it. The only way is allow the Pakistanis to sell those Chinese weapons here. But now you may be thinking, doesn't China know this? Well, China knows this. China has apparently no problem with this. China knows that Americans are trying to dissect every single aspect of my weaponry. But China is happy that this is a small thing for me. The bigger game is that if Ukrainians use these weapons in the war with Russia, the Chinese will be able to get a deep insight about how further they can improvise their weapons. So for Chinese, there's a trade-off. The trade-off is let Americans know my technology. I give a damn about it because Americans will anyway get to know about it. But what is more important for me is if Russia is one of the persons against whom the Ukrainians are going to use these weapons, then how these weapons perform in the war, how much more improvisation can I do, is what is more important for China because China wants to today look at, or rather is tomorrow looking at, itself as a major arms exporter in the world. So if it is exporting weapons today to Ukraine through Pakistan, then tomorrow it would want to directly export weapons to Ukraine if the need be. So one thing is very important here, that where does India come into play? Well, these high technology agreements that I just told you about, these actually give a cover to the Indian intelligence and India's military to engage with the Ukrainian intelligence and Ukraine military. So today, after these agreements, if India's intelligence and military setups are going to engage with the counterparts in Ukraine, then by engaging with Ukraine, we'll be able to also, like the Americans, analyze these Pakistani weapons. Now, you may be thinking, why are these weapons crucial for India to analyze? I mean, Americans are analyzing them, let them analyze. No, they are very crucial for India. You know why? Because the Chinese, for a very long period of time, are now supporting the Pakistanis who are using these weapons against India in Kashmir and Northeast. Today in the Kashmir theater, today in the Northeast theater, all the weaponaries which are being used by the Pakistanis are apparently weaponaries which are none other but weaponaries which are primarily of this origin, Chinese origin. If China is today supplying weapons to Pakistan, and from Pakistan these weapons are going to Ukraine, which are going to be used against Russia, then through these agreements, Indian military and Indian intelligence will also get a deep insight about these Chinese weapons which are there. And through this, we will be able to develop counter strategies, because tomorrow we would get a deeper insight that what kind of weaponaries are these, how should we try to tackle them, should we import weaponaries which are more advanced than the Chinese ones so that we can counter them, or for that matter, should we try to only restrict ourselves by importing, not importing these weapons, but rather self manufacturing them. So you see that insight about this is crucial for India's own military industrial complex as well. So this is the larger geopolitics number one behind these kind of emerging and critical technology agreements which are there. Number one. Number two, by going to Ukraine, India also communicated to Ukraine very crucially that we have not just come as a nation called India, we have also come here today as a leader of the global south. We have come here today as a leader of the global south because we want to convey to you, Ukraine, that you today manufacture a huge amount of wheat. You today undertake a huge amount of production of sunflower oil. And because of this war, the production of sunflower oil and production of wheat are both affected. And because of these two things that are affected, the countries of the global south back home are getting affected badly. And because the countries of the global south are getting affected badly, we told Ukraine that Ukraine, we today stand here as a leader of the global south to communicate and tell you that please stop the war, stand for peace, because the countries of the global south get affected. This is the economic message that we were able to give through the visit. And third, and the most important point, that when India went to Ukraine, when India spoke about what is called as the wheat issue, the sunflower oil issue, when India spoke about itself as a leader of the global south, when India said that we don't stand for Russia or we don't stand for Ukraine, but we stand for peace, India very carefully communicated that we are a globally responsible nation. Today, India is a rising power. Today, we call India in the foreign policy as an emerging power. And an emerging power is a power that is willing to take responsibilities. By going to Ukraine, by communicating these geo-economic and geopolitical and geostrategic issues, we told Ukraine that see, not only we are here for you and your peace, but we gave a global message that India is a globally responsible player. And as a globally responsible player, we are willing to play global politics. We are willing to take part in power politics, but provided that the world also simultaneously recognizes our global ambition. So, from the global perspective, from the global ambition perspective, this visit is very crucial. From India's global power play, this visit is crucial. From the geostrategic part of the Pakistan China angle, this visit is crucial. From India's global south leadership, this visit is crucial. So, I hope that after this video now, you are in a position to better analyze and examine the overall analysis of how should we look at these kind of power dynamics when they happen in the world. Thank you.